From Interfaith Alliance, this is State of Belief Radio. I'm your host, Reverend Welton Gaddy. Another month has gone by since our last visit with Greg Lebel, Assistant Professor of Political Management at George Washington University and a veteran of several presidential campaigns. In what is traditionally the quiet summer season in electoral politics, we've had recent Supreme Court decisions and ongoing developments on Capitol Hill that have prevented things from quieting down very much. And the extreme temperatures have probably contributed to the overheated political atmosphere. So I'm very pleased to welcome Greg Lebel back to our air-conditioned studios for some analysis of what's been going on, not in the studio, but in the realm of politics. Greg, welcome.
Thanks, Welton. It's nice to be here.
Some of the initial furor over the Supreme Court decision regarding Affordable Health Care Act has died down, but I'm wondering, do you see a long-term impact on either presidential campaign from the court's ruling?
Probably not. And I think one of the best indicators of that is a poll that I was just looking at within the last couple of days that indicates that most Americans are getting a little tired of the debate. This is something, it's an interesting question, and we often don't see questions like this. So it's an interesting question, and the results are interesting as well, because Americans are just kind of getting tired of the debate on this.
But you know what? Someone hadn't told Romney.
Well, no, I know, but what's Romney going to talk about? Romney's still going after his base, and I think this showed up in the speech at the NAACP this week. Romney is still feeling the need to make the pitch to the base, and that's where health care reform comes in. Persuadable voters are just kind of tired. A lot of them are saying, "Look, the Supreme Court's made the decision. Let's go. Let's just move on."
Well, there are a lot of pundits, at least on the night talk shows, that say this was a test of Obama's entire presidency, and they're overstating it.
They're definitely overstating it. It wasn't a test of the entire presidency. It was obviously it was an important decision. It was a complex decision in a number of ways. I think it wasn't a nice sort of clean up or down vote. Right. Certainly, I mean, especially when you mix in the Medicaid piece. But no, it certainly I don't think it ever was. It's simply not a test of the presidency per se.
Okay, now you understand these people better than I do, thank goodness. But this week, the U.S. House of Representatives held what I think was the 33rd vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act. CBS News estimates that the body has now invested at least 80 hours in this doomed repeal effort. I listened to NPR the other night put a financial value on the time that Congress has devoted to it. What I'm asking you to tell me, if you understand it better than I do, and I hope you do, is does this have any effect that I may be missing?
Well, this is another example of the Republican leadership focusing like a laser on jobs. Let's face it, that was a joke. This again is an example of these folks' perceived need to continue to rouse the base voters for November. There's no other reason to be doing this. This is a classic example of really, at this point at least, beating a dead horse. Nothing is going to happen on this, certainly between now and November, and probably in the long run.
Last month, President Obama took unilateral action to offer legal residency for millions of young undocumented people who were brought to this country as children. The Romney campaign was widely criticized for not taking a firm stand on the issue. Again, now that a little time has passed, do you see this decision as having long-term implications for the outcome of the election?
I guess in a word, again, I'm going to say no. I think that what the Obama decision did was continue to sort of firm up that support for his candidacy. The numbers are pretty solid and pretty lopsided. Romney boxed himself into a corner on immigration during the fight for the nomination. He was going to be, further to the right than anybody else on that stage through the winter and spring. So he's really stuck right now. There's nothing that he can really say about this that's going to matter. This issue will matter among various Hispanic groups in this country, certainly. Probably, unless something tremendously unusual happens to the president's benefit. But I don't know what candidate Romney can do to change the dynamics here at this point. He's on record. He's on record very strongly on this stuff.
But that's not necessarily a influential fact. I mean, he's
on record,
right?
Right. But what makes it significant is that he's on record, and he's got a base he needs that base to support him. If he looks like he's waffling on that at all, he's going to run into trouble with his base. He can't. He's still in that phase of the campaign where he's focusing on the people who should be voting for him anyway. He hasn't been able or willing to make that switch at this point to the discussion to move to that next step about reaching out to some of those persuadable voters in the middle.
Greg, it's not the first election cycle where charges and counter charges regarding attempts to manipulate the voting process have been heard, but the issue has gotten more press this time around, with progressives accusing conservatives of methodically erecting obstacles targeting Democratic voters, and conservatives straining to find evidence of the election fraud in their programs, purportedly, which those programs address. In Pennsylvania a few weeks ago, a state GOP leader was taped listing achievements that would ensure Mitt Romney's election, and he included some of these programs among those achievements. Now, we do elect our leaders one vote at a time, I think. Are you concerned about this issue?
Yeah, I think anyone who really looks at this carefully has to be concerned about it. I mean, this is a blatant and naked attempt to keep the vote down among groups of people that these folks don't want voting. I mean, you just look at where it's happening. It's in state legislatures that are predominantly Republican. They're in states that are going to be significant. That are probably going to be in play in November, and it's an effort to solve a problem that really every study that's been done shows doesn't exist.
What have you observed in the way the presidential campaigns and SuperPACS have been raising money recently that you found noteworthy or maybe even surprising?
Well, just the sheer amount continues to be breathtaking. The Romney folks, we heard the reports about Romney outraging Obama in the last quarter. That's a little bit of a misnomer. It's Romney and his SuperPACS and the party versus Obama and SuperPACS and the party. So it's a much larger sort of conglomeration of money than the headlines have sort of suggested. What I think is interesting about this is that, and we're beginning to see some people look at this and talk about this, there's a point at which more money doesn't matter anymore. We know that in congressional races. It's always been the case. More money is in terms of running the campaign is helpful up to a point, but there's a point over which it just doesn't matter anymore. The difference dissipates almost entirely, and I suspect that's where we're going to be in this race. Yes, Romney's raising more than Obama, but Obama's raising some pretty hefty dollars himself, and so I think that while the Obama people are using this to rally the troops, we need the money, we're going to lose, those messages are pretty dire that we're seeing in our email inboxes these days. I think the reality is that this is not to take away from the importance of raising money, right, for well or ill, but I think that the differences by the time we get to the election will be less dramatic than they might appear right now.
Do you have any hope that Congress eventually will address in a substantive way the campaign issue of financing?
I'd love to say yes, but I'm going to say no. Because it's become another one of those third rails in American politics, and I think neither side is willing to take the step out into that no man's land between the two positions. And we watched, we saw the McCain-Feingold piece sort of try to deal with it, and it got completely destroyed between the Supreme Court and other subsequent legislative actions. That there's very little left of that. I'm guessing that people just don't have the stomach for
and I
going
guess where
there.
we are right now, they can complain about it but not do anything about it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
When you look at the candidates for the White House, their messaging, their fundraising strategies, and then you look at the poll numbers that still indicate a virtual dead heat between the two major candidates, are these numbers what you expect?
In this political climate, yes. We are this reflects the polarization that we know is there, and what we're seeing is that sort of played out in these numbers very, very dramatically. What we are seeing is you mentioned messaging. I think we began to see in the last couple of weeks the Obama campaign's message about Bain Capital, although it took some early hits from some of the president's friends. In some of the key states, some of those states that are going to really matter in November, the message is working. It seems to be having an impact. So they're going to stick with this message. The Romney folks have to continue to play that jobs card. That's what they've got to work with right now, and they're going to have to continue to play it. The unemployment rate is helping them with that, certainly, but I think that's sort of where this is going to be. Obama needs to keep this, and we've said that we've known this all along. He's got to keep this as far away from being a referendum on the first term and more about who has the better message for the next 4 years. And polls are showing that at least as of now, the Obama campaign message is perceived as the better message by voters.
I don't mean to underplay what you've just said, because I hope that messaging is important, but I sometimes feel like nobody's listening, that they're just thinking they have in their mind that we can't take another 4 years of Obama, or we've got to have Romney, and if you ask them for a good explanation of why, you don't get much.
Well, that's probably true to a certain extent, and that's why I think this election is going to be particularly complex, because, again, we have that sliver of Americans in the middle who the misnomer we always use for them is independents. They're not actually independents. Some are Democrats, some are Republicans, some are registered with no party. What they are really is persuadables. Traditionally in American politics, there's about a 20% swath of those people. That has narrowed to something more like 5% of people who really haven't, at least are not professing any sort of preference at this point. So there has to be some effort there. But I think more and more we're seeing that this election, while those people are important and a lot of effort will be put into to moving them one way or the other, I think this is going to be more like the election in 2004, the Bush re-elect campaign, where they really focused on bringing out the base, it's going to be a get out the vote effort. And I think both sides are going to sort of end up there in this campaign. That's going to be this may be decided by the relative level of interest and engagement by the two bases, magnified to some extent by those middle voters.
Great. Do you remember Ron Paul?
I remember the name. Yeah.
He seems to be really staying out of the spotlight. Either that or he can't get anybody to shine it on him. But his supporters continue to complicate things, especially at the state level. Is it possible that Dr. Paul will be a factor at the GOP convention?
Will he be a factor? No. Do his folks want to figure out a way to be some sort of a factor? Probably yes. We saw that. I think the last time we were here, we talked about Louisiana. I think it's interesting what happened in Massachusetts since then, where the Ron Paul delegates were presented with basically a pledge of loyalty that they were required to sign. Not unlike, I guess, the pledge of loyalty that the Catholic Bishop of Northern Virginia presented to their to their Sunday school teachers in the last couple of weeks. So I think both sides are sort of are playing this game right now. Paul has something like 120 delegates. I mean, that's nothing really in the larger scheme. But they're probably going to be 120 angry vocal delegates. And I think what we've learned about Ron Paul and his people is expect the unexpected. I don't. Obviously, Ron Paul wants to have some role at the convention, and the Romney folks want this to be a picture-perfect convention. So, how those two things are going to reconcile themselves, I don't know. But the Romney people really want to try to keep Ron Paul and his people relatively happy without giving Ron Paul any chance to really say anything.
Will anybody that was on the primary stages for debates, anybody have any strong influence at the convention other than Romney?
On Romney, on the conduct of the convention? Yes. No, none of those people will have any significant influence in this. So this is Romney's show, and for that reason alone, that collection of fascinating characters will not will not have a lot of say in how things transpire.
Do you see anything happening this summer that may play a significant role in November?
Well, I think we already did, and I think it was that jobs report that we just saw come out that shows us still hovering at a little bit above 8%. It's interesting because the likelihood is that won't change very much, and this is what the two candidates are going to be running either on or away from or something, figuring out how to interpret to the American voters. So we are, as you mentioned at the beginning, we really are entering that what has traditionally been that sort of quiet period when Americans are going on vacation, it's too hot to think, all of those kinds of things. The conventions will suck a lot of the air out of the room. The vice presidential choice for Romney is we're getting much more sort of focused on that and when and who and how. So I don't think there'll be any surprises there. He's not going down the road that John McCain went down 4 years ago. So no, I see a fairly quiet rest of the summer as we get into the conventions, and I think Romney hopes for an orderly and relatively quiet. Quiet might not be the right, but certainly orderly convention on his part.
From a perspective of a former campaign manager, more than a university professor, really, what are you watching for? What are you looking to see if it happens that could really change things?
Well, I think in terms of the conventions, we really I think we need to watch for the evidence of any of those sort of cracks in the wall. What we haven't talked about is the which have not sort of been resolved yet is the platform committees, platform committees and credentials committees. Now, most people's eyes sort of glaze over when we get there, but those are important steps along the way. That's pretty much inside baseball. But these are places where there can be some interesting debates, and I think the tenor of those debates, the shelf life of those debates may tell us something about what the general temperature is within both of the parties at this point.
Do you think, Greg, that it's going to stay this close right up until Election Day?
I do, and I think that means this is going to be a really, really nasty election cycle. Yeah, I do.
Greg Lebel is a veteran of numerous presidential campaigns and brings a level of insight that's hard to top. Today, he teaches political management at George Washington University and informs listeners of State of Belief Radio. Greg, it's always great to have you here. This time is no exception to that, and we look forward to another time soon on State of Belief Radio.
Thanks, Welton. I look forward to seeing you again.